Wait, what is this
But
argument? I'm not totally familiar with
there's
that.
like I keep seeing tweets about like B2B marketers don't have taste and
Oh,
B2C marketers do, and B2C marketers will make fun of B2B marketers for realizing that they're marketing to humans and not robots. B2C marketing started with like standing with a clipboard in the grocery store watching people select toothpaste. B2B marketers have never had to do that. And now it's so competitive. It's now the competition has gotten to that point. It used to be you only had IBM, but then all of a sudden you had IBM, Oracle, Salesforce. Now you have IBM, Oracle, Salesforce, HubSpot. Look at Hopin. Hopin has a bunch of competitors. It's so hard to differentiate yourself. So this is my contrary opinion. There are a lot of brands and CMOs out there that will say that their company is an in-house media company or their content team. And what they really mean is we do more than blog.
right.
You have some courses and a podcast. And to me, like having actually worked in media, that's not how that still feels like content marketing. It doesn't feel like am I'm not doing what the media world does to sort of focus on how do I cater to the where does this piece of content fit into someone's day? So like instead of just having an hour long podcast or multiple hours long, like what are, is there a part of someone's life where it's like the 15 minutes they have between like commuting or something like that? Like, is that where I fit in? What are the like ways I can hit multiple demographics with a franchise or a series? And then how does that then turn into a franchise? How to, like, when I look at Marvel and I see comic books, movies, TV shows, I mean, merchandise, obviously, but I don't think we'll go there, but multiple different formats and how they all work together. I think if you've seen the Doctor Strange trailer and you watch the What If cartoons from Marvel, you'll have this oh shit moment where you thought the What If series was this like sort of like separate thing that now all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, you're gonna have to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking of like how all of it fits together and not just being able to say I do more than blogging.
What do you have examples of good media company or good in-house media companies? I think I get your point on, there's kind of modular components and like there's different, 15-minute podcast here, multiple forms that you can hit multiple people with, but who's doing that well?
In my best example, and I think is the most exemplary, is Profit Well.
Okay.
And the reason I think, and in Wistia, and I think Wistia has an incentive because that it showcases like the best of their product.
Mm-hmm.
Profitwell is an interesting example considering their product isn't the media. It's not media. And the different variety of shows that they have and how they target the different, it's not all like business. It's got different forms of like, I think it's what like Jay Akunzo says, like each thing has a specific premise to it that, most podcasts or shows that people put on, I don't think an audience can turn to like, a colleague or a friend and explain and describe the show in a succinct way. Like, oh, it's a Q&A interview where these people talk to the professional, and a month later, they might remember, like the person they told might remember, oh, it's a Q&A with some professionals. But then when there's a sea of those things, it's like, it doesn't matter. And they might end up on the wrong one that they go find. But
Mm-hmm.
when with Profitwell, like they are focused on the topics and giving the show a certain appeal. I've heard their CEO and Patrick, I'm blanking on his last name right now, but he's talked about how he doesn't just look at what competitors are doing, but he looks at all the other media that the audience is consuming and trying to figure out like what are the schemas that I can borrow from those elements and stuff that I can help them say it's like this, but for that. So if like one of the ways I would approach a show is if I found out my audience loves game shows, great. Well, instead of doing an interview with like a professional, can I do a game show?
Hmm.
Another, can I do, what can you learn from, I'm going to butcher it because I can't remember the name of it right now. What's the one with the hot sauce?
Oh, Hot
Hot
Ones.
one, hot ones.
Yeah, I love that show.
Like if it just took a different angle where it's a game show slash interview, so it's fresh. It has what Derek Thomas has written about in Hitmakers, where he says like you need something familiar and something new.
Mm.
And so something familiar being, and you could take two familiar things and turn them into something new. And that's how creativity and art works essentially. But I think that's where you have this whole B2B marketers thinking like B2C marketers is coming from. And I think the hot takes in that are sort of like sophomoric, and I don't like to get into those like arguments of B2B, B2C.
Wait, what is this
But
argument? I'm not totally familiar with
there's
that.
like I keep seeing tweets about like how like B2B marketers don't have taste and
Oh,
B2C marketers do, and how like B2C marketers will make fun of B2B marketers for realizing that they're marketing to humans and not robots. And it's true, but I think they lose sight of the fact that B2C marketing started with like, uh, products and goods and stuff like, and people standing with a clipboard in the grocery store watching people select toothpaste. Like B2B marketers have never had to do that. And now it's so competitive, they have to, for the same reason that it's now the competition has gotten to that point. It used to be you only had IBM, but then all of a sudden you had IBM, Oracle, Salesforce. Now you have IBM, Oracle, Salesforce, HubSpot, and everyone else like who's in that game. And so look at Hopin. Hopin has a bunch of competitors. Look at any business and there's feature parity. There's like, it's so hard to differentiate yourself. And I think it's moving into this world where, yes, B2B marketers have to accept or adapt to B2C type marketing philosophies.
mm.
But I don't think that I think it's pointless to like point out that this is happening because it was just how it happened. It's like how long B2B's been around. It's pretty infantile compared to B2C in terms
There's
of
also an
marketing.
echo chamber in B2C too. Like you can look at all kinds of D2C startups and see the same copy, the same creative, the same ads. And like maybe it looks savvier, but it's still not creative, so to speak, because they're still kind of copying each other in the same system. So I find like whether you're B2B or B2C or whatever, looking across all different spaces and trying to like, I guess like you kind of alluded to this, but that creative synergy of taking something familiar and blending it with something unique, So
Yeah,
I'll take ideas from affiliate marketers for content marketing in specific. I'll take conversion rate ideas from B2C, D2C startups. And it's like, how can I apply this in my context? And I
yeah,
think once you kind of break those silos and labels down, it's like you just kind of do what's best for your situation.
exactly. And that's why it's like, I think I try to preach a lot about the empathy for like what is someone going through. Like when I have my team do jobs to be done, I ask them to not stop at like, I need this to do that, to keep asking why after you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So at Udemy was like, I'm learning this skill so I can get this job. Well, why do they want that job? What's the motivation? What is the emotional value of them getting that job? And if you tap into that, you tap into something that is even more universal, more human than just like, I need this information to do X, Y, Z. It's why do you need to do X, Y, and Z that matter?
Mm-hmm.
And that is where you get into, when you tap into that, you then start to think of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how other, not just marketing, but how anything taps into B2C, film, movies, books. any media, news, how like even like what is now considered news, but infotainment, like how are they triggering emotions and getting people to grow an audience? Uh, you might understand that, yeah, there's some nefarious things that they're doing, but then you learn from those nefarious things to figure out how to do things in a benevolent way.
So how are you approaching building that media machine at Hopin? Like, it sounds like you've thought a lot about how to stand out, how people do it the wrong way. And I kind of get the demand gen side, but how are you focusing on building a differentiated media machine internally?
So the first thing that I've had to do and has been, I spent the first few months building the demand gen engine, and that is, I don't want to say is perfection or a well-oiled machine yet, but is at least become a flywheel.
And this is like SEO and complimentary offers on the
Like if
page
you
and
go to the
getting
blog
them.
today, like that stuff
Mhm.
and how it ties to our demand gen efforts through like, you'll see like this week, we published a ebook guide on event sponsorship, and we did an event today on event sponsorship. I don't do events. That's the demand gen field marketing team. And what I've done is I got alignment with them where instead of them coming up with the event idea, we plot together the topics and when they're like that content will come out and how they can then leverage it. So, and the value of that content in the content led webinars and virtual events that we're doing have so much more value in it because, as you know, when you're doing research for a long form piece of content, there's even material that ends up on the cutting room floor that you can then share with them to like be this extra little piece that gets brought up. And you
Mhm.
share that with like the sales team. So when they see that someone read this piece of content, instead of talking to them about the creepiness of that content, you can say, hey, if you're interested in this, here's another article like that's related to this, or another thing that I've been thinking about, even though we're the ones who shared it with them and said to
Mhm.
share it. But how I think about building a media company is first, and this is all the reason I can't say concretely is it's actually still in the works.
Mhm.
Uh, and the reason it's still in the works and I didn't just like start launching things is efficiency. I am worried about not, I, at the end of the day, we talked about the recession of 2008, but there's been like, what, 3 recessions since then? Like recessions down, like the economy is like a lot of ups and downs. I want to make sure that what we build has sustainability, and that when it comes to that same idea of like, if you cut this other thing becomes stale, that is the thing that I can tie to revenue. And so I am working on first cross-functional alignment. So not just like within marketing, but within throughout the org, and aligning everything we do to the company OKRs, even if it's a show, and always being able to articulate that. Because if I can articulate it, my CMO can articulate it to the CEO, can articulate it to our finance team, and everyone's a champion of what we're doing. That we're getting close to. The other way I think about it is, what are the resources we have? What can we build? So we have a laundry list of ideas of things we can do that go beyond just like podcasts and video series. Like I even threw out the idea of a like word game with the popularity of Wordle.
Mhm.
Uh, and how do we do that? And do we have the resources? Is it something we can do on a consistent basis? And then I then think of um, basically of those ideas, you got to know obviously what the premise is, but then what is the what is the main source format of it, and then what are the ancillary formats of it to create a franchise. So I'm thinking of it as like even our SEO content, how can we package it up in a way that someone understands that this is like part of a bigger library? So like
Mhm.
just like when you go to your public library, you go to the history section or the cooking section, like how can I like categorize and put all of our content into a certain like bucket that the customer or the customer of our content understands that this is part of a series, and if I like this I can go deeper and subscribe to that. And then, so that's like the magazine world of it, if you think about that, like how magazines are run. But then the multimedia stuff is about the resources. How do we create a sustainable program instead of just saying, oh, we're going to launch a podcast that's like once a week or whatever? Why not launch multiple limited like duration? So let's say a season is only 6 episodes, but it comes around once a year. All right, that's only 6 weeks. What do you do the other ones? And so it allows you to create multiple different franchises that have a cadence to it that then people will anticipate and know when that next one's coming, and you can start to like build that audience in that scarcity. And then you just got to make sure that all of that feeds into things. So if I released this year's 2022 guide to event sponsorship, well, I definitely want to make sure that the media that we're publishing through between now and next year covers that topic. So when it comes time to refresh that piece of content, I have new material, new stories to inject into it and to atomize from it. And so thinking about it from that way, and as I said earlier, thinking about how it fits into the customer's like life and how that relates to the product. So how are we going to, like, the phrase I use is from OPP to HPP, so other people's property. So how do we play there? And then how do we use that to get us to the Hopin product portfolio?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking of it as a map, and what are the, and content as the breadcrumbs that go out to bring people in. So Rand Fishkin's idea of who will amplify this. So it's not just publishing on our own platform, but creating content in a way that can be chopped up so it's easily distributed and shared, not just on our like our own channels like social media and so forth, but other people's property. So like other like experts who are in their field, the professionals. When you think of an enterprise strategy, right, a content strategy, you don't want to just target the buyer. You want to target below and above the line. You want to like everyone who's involved in that decision, you want to influence so they can then influence the buyer decision. And so it's that same strategy, but on a much broader level, where the people who you want to influence, the people who might not buy the product, but when someone asks them for a recommendation, you're top of mind.